What if the roles we play in life become so real, we lose sight of where they end and we begin? That question lingers over the life of Val Kilmer, a man whose career was defined by transformation, mystery, and an unwavering commitment to his craft. From the moment he stepped into Hollywood's spotlight, Kilmer was never just acting, he was becoming. And now, with his tragic passing at the age of 65, many are left wondering what truly lay behind the characters he brought to life. Was he the hero, the rebel, or the tortured soul, on screen and off? This story isn't just about a Hollywood star. It's about obsession, legacy, and the price of living multiple lives at once. If you want more stories that peel back the curtain on the most intriguing lives in showbiz, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Long before he lit up the silver screen as Iceman or gave a chilling portrayal of Jim Morrison, Val Kilmer was simply a quiet, introspective boy growing up in Los Angeles, a city known more for its stars than for the shadows behind them. Born on December 31st, 1959, Kilmer was surrounded by creativity from an early age. But his life wasn't bathed in the glamour that would later define his career. His parents divorced when he was young, and the tragic death of his younger brother Wesley, who drowned at just 15 years old, left a permanent scar on his heart. That loss shaped him, hardened him, and perhaps helped build the depth and emotional intensity that would later mesmerize audiences on screen. While many teens were still trying to find themselves, Kilmer was already chasing purpose. At 17, he became the youngest student ever accepted into Juilliard's drama division, a feat that spoke volumes about his raw talent and relentless determination. It wasn't about fame for Val, it was about mastery. Juilliard honed his discipline and deepened his love for theater, setting the stage for a career that would defy expectations. His first big screen role came in the offbeat spy parody Top Secret in 1984. He sang his own songs, delivered lines with razor-sharp timing, and turned what could have been a forgettable spoof into a cult classic. It was a bold debut that made Hollywood take notice, not just of his good looks, but of his comedic and musical. Then, in 1986, came Top Gun. As the cocky, ice-cold pilot Tom Iceman Kazansky, Kilmer didn't just act. He stole scenes from Tom Cruise with a single stare. The role cemented his place in Hollywood, turning him into a global heartthrob overnight. Yet even in the height of his fame, Kilmer remained somewhat of an enigma. Brilliant, unpredictable, and unwilling to play the game like everyone else. He wasn't content with being a one-note leading man. He wanted more, and his next choices would prove just how far he was willing to go. If Top Gun launched Val Kilmer into the mainstream, it was The Doors that revealed the depth of his artistic obsession. Taking on the role of rock legend Jim Morrison in Oliver Stone's 1991 biopic wasn't just another part, it was a full-blown transformation. Kilmer didn't simply mimic Morrison, he inhabited him. For months, he studied the singer's movements, voice, and psychological quirks. He dressed like him, walked like him, and immersed himself so fully in the role that even members of The Doors were stunned. In the studio, he recorded vocals so indistinguishable from Morrison's that bandmates reportedly couldn't tell the difference. It was haunting, it was mesmerizing, and it was Kilmer at his most fearless. This wasn't an isolated performance. It was a window into the kind of actor he was becoming. Kilmer's approach to acting bordered on the extreme. He once admitted to staying in character off camera for weeks, refusing to respond to his real name. Whether it was learning to play the piano and speak Latin for the saint, or enduring physical strain for roles in Tombstone and Heat, Kilmer chased authenticity with relentless intensity. To him, acting wasn't pretending, it was becoming. That commitment sometimes made him difficult to work with, but it also resulted in some of the most riveting performances of the 90s. He wasn't just chasing roles, he was chasing truth, and he wouldn't stop until he felt it in his bones. As Val Kilmer's star rose, so did whispers about what it was like to work with him behind the scenes, and those whispers eventually turned into headlines. By the mid-90s, Kilmer had developed a reputation that followed him from set to set, brilliant on camera, but volatile off. Stories began to circulate about intense clashes with directors and co-stars, and while some dismissed them as the price of genius, others saw warning signs of deeper tensions brewing beneath his artistic ambition. On the set of Batman Forever in 1995, Kilmer stepped into one of Hollywood's most coveted roles, the Caped Crusader, but the experience was far from heroic. Director Joel Schumacher later described Kilmer as childish and impossible, claiming that the actor became uncooperative and even refused to speak to him for stretches during filming. The suit may have fit, but the production was anything but smooth. Despite the film's commercial success, Kilmer was quietly replaced in the sequel. Then came The Island of Dr. Moreau in 1996, one of the most infamously troubled productions in film history. Kilmer's disputes with director Richard Stanley reportedly contributed to Stanley's early firing, and his behavior on set was said to be so combative that even seasoned actors like Marlon Brando kept their distance. These incidents painted Kilmer as a perfectionist, unwilling to compromise. A man so deeply committed to his vision that collaboration often took a back seat. Some called it ego, others called it integrity, but whatever it was, it made Val Kilmer one of the most talked about and unpredictable actors of his era. In 2014, everything changed. After years of living in the shadows of Hollywood's spotlight, Val Kilmer was diagnosed with throat cancer, a revelation he initially kept private. The man who once delivered lines with chilling precision was now fighting to keep his voice, his breath, and ultimately his life. He underwent rounds of chemotherapy, radiation, and 2 tracheotomies, which left his voice barely audible and his body significantly weakened. For an actor whose entire craft depended on expression, it was a devastating blow. But in true Kilmer fashion, he didn't fade quietly. Instead, he adapted. In a remarkable move, Kilmer teamed up with a company that used artificial intelligence to recreate his voice, drawing from hours of archival audio. The result was uncanny, almost ghostly, and it gave him a new way to communicate, to act, and to reclaim a part of himself that cancer had tried to take. This innovative approach wasn't just about technology, it was about defiance. Kilmer was telling the world that he still had something to say. Then, in 2022, came one of the most emotional moments of his career. After decades away from the cockpit, Kilmer returned as Iceman in Top Gun Maverick. But this wasn't the cocky pilot from 1986. It was a wiser, more fragile Iceman, mirroring Kilmer's own journey. His scene with Tom Cruise was brief, but it didn't need to be long. It was raw, heartfelt, and devastatingly real. In just a few minutes, Kilmer reminded the world why he mattered. He wasn't just back, he was unforgettable. Behind the camera and away from the spotlight, Val Kilmer's personal life unfolded like one of the many roles he played: passionate, complicated, and full of contradictions. In 1988, at the height of his rising fame, he married British actress Joanne Whalley, whom he had met just a year earlier on the set of the fantasy adventure film Willow. The chemistry between them was undeniable, both on screen and off. For a time, they were a Hollywood power couple. He, the intense, unpredictable heartthrob; she, the poised and elegant rising star. Their union brought 2 children into the world: a daughter, Mercedes, and a son, Jack. Val spoke often about how deeply he loved his children, crediting them with grounding him and giving him a sense of purpose beyond the film sets and flashing cameras. But the demands of 2 high-profile careers, long stretches apart, and Kilmer's own restless nature led to their divorce in 1996. Though the marriage ended, the bond with his children remained one of the most important and consistent parts of his life, especially as he faced his later health battles. But Kilmer's love life didn't begin or end with Whalley. Throughout his career, he was linked to a long list of famous women, relationships that only added to his mystique. One of the most significant was his connection with Cher. What began as a brief romance in the early 90s evolved into a deep and lasting friendship. Kilmer often spoke of her with reverence and gratitude, especially after she stood by him during the darkest days of his cancer treatment. She visited him at his lowest, offered care and comfort, and helped advocate for his medical needs. For someone often portrayed as aloof or guarded, Kilmer's vulnerable affection for Cher revealed a different side of him, a man capable of deep trust and loyalty. There were also whispers of romances with other high-profile figures, like supermodel Cindy Crawford and actress Angelina Jolie. These relationships, though less public and often more fleeting, contributed to the image of Kilmer as a mysterious figure, a man who attracted beauty, fame, and intensity wherever he went. But unlike many of his Hollywood peers, Kilmer never remarried. In his memoir, I'm Your Huckleberry, he reflected on the isolation that came with his fame, admitting that he often longed for deeper connection, but struggled to find it. He described love not as a fairy tale, but as something elusive, complicated by his own ambitions and the walls he sometimes built to protect himself. Through all the highs and lows, what remained was a portrait of a man who felt things deeply, loved with abandon, and lived with the kind of passion that couldn't be easily contained. Even as his voice grew faint and his health declined, Val Kilmer's creative flame refused to go out. In his final years, he poured himself into the kind of work that transcended physical limitations. With acting no longer his primary outlet, he turned to visual art, poetry, and writing, channels through which he could still express the deep well of emotion and vision that had always defined him. His 2020 memoir, I'm Your Huckleberry, gave fans an unfiltered glimpse into the soul behind the icon, a man wrestling with fame, mortality, and the meaning of love. Vulnerable and introspective, the book stripped away the myths and laid bare a lifetime of yearning for purpose, for truth, and for connection. He also continued to appear in documentaries and art projects, including the hauntingly intimate 2021 film Val, which used home footage and narration from his son Jack to tell his story from the inside out. It was raw, it was honest, it was Kilmer unmasked. Despite battling the lingering effects of throat cancer, including permanent damage to his voice and windpipe, Kilmer never stopped creating. And that creative drive was more than a coping mechanism. It was his way of staying alive, spiritually and artistic. He once said that art is how we reach beyond ourselves. And in his case, it became how he transcended pain. On April 1st, 2025, Val Kilmer passed away at the age of 65 due to complications from pneumonia. The news stunned Hollywood and fans across the world, even though his health struggles had long been public. Tributes poured in almost instantly, not just from fellow actors and directors, but from generations of fans who had grown up watching him transform into legends. Tom Cruise, Cher, and his children all shared heartfelt messages, remembering not just the actor, but the man. Brilliant, maddening, magnetic, and above all, unforgettable. Kilmer didn't just leave behind a filmography. He left behind a legacy of risk, reinvention, and raw humanity. His final years were not marked by silence, but by a quiet roar, the kind only an artist of his caliber could make. Val Kilmer's legacy isn't confined to any one role. It stretches across genres, decades, and personas, each performance a testament to his relentless pursuit of authenticity. From the surreal absurdity of Top Secret to the brooding genius of Doc Holliday in Tombstone, from the smoldering cool of Iceman to the raw intensity of Jim Morrison, Kilmer left no character untouched by his unique energy. What set him apart wasn't just his talent, it was his refusal to play it safe. He constantly zigged when Hollywood expected him to zag, often choosing depth and complexity over box office guarantees. Even when his choices raised eyebrows or sparked tension on set, no one could deny his commitment. He didn't just act, he disappeared into roles, often to the point of obsession. That level of dedication earned him admiration, confusion, and sometimes criticism, but above all, it earned him respect. In the days following his passing, tributes flooded in, painting a portrait of a man as complicated as he was captivating. Tom Cruise called him a brilliant scene partner who elevated every moment, while filmmaker Oliver Stone remembered his Morrison as so haunting it blurred the line between fact and performance. Cher, in a moving post, called him a true original and thanked him for letting her be part of his wild, beautiful ride. Even co-stars who had clashed with him over the years acknowledged the force he brought to every project. Intense, stubborn, but unforgettable. The industry may have struggled to contain him, but it never stopped admiring. Fans, too, voiced their grief, sharing memories of the first time they saw him on screen, quoting lines, posting clips, and reflecting on how his characters shaped their childhoods and adolescence. Kilmer wasn't the kind of celebrity you could easily define. He was unpredictable, sometimes misunderstood, but always real. That, perhaps, is why he still resonates. In a world of polished personas, Val Kilmer gave us something raw, something honest, something unforgettable, and that's why he won't be easily replaced or forgotten.